At this point in the course, we've created a website that allows users to view items that are currently being auctioned, as well as post new items to put them up for auction. What's more, we've even got a layer of validation in place to keep users from posting invalid data to our site. So far, we're humming right along, but we're still in desperate need of two things. First is the ability to bid on auctions, and we'll take care of that in just a moment. And second, a better use of recent browser advances in creating enjoyable user experiences. In other words, AJAX. If you're not familiar with the term, AJAX describes the concept of updating sections or even all of your page with new data without the need to request and render the entire page from the server. The AJAX approach is best suited for updating data that changes while the page might be open, or to create a better user interaction for things that normally require a full page refresh. For instance, submitting a bid on an item is a good candidate for AJAX because it is a relatively simple task with simple feedback. In this video, we'll implement the ability to bid on auctions in our site, and then I'll show you how to enhance that bidding process by applying AJAX techniques to it. First, let's implement the ability to bid on an auction in a full-page manner. That is, having to navigate through multiple pages to complete the bid. Once we've got that working, we can circle back and apply AJAX principles to make the experience smoother. We'll start by adding a new form within our auction details page that contains two fields: a hidden field that contains the ID of the auction, and a text field named amount that contains the user's bid amount. Notice that I'm using the same techniques and helpers that I used back in Chapter 6 to build this form. I start with a call to the HTML begin form helper on line 34. Here I pass the controller action that I would like to post this form to, in this case, the bid action on the auctions controller. Then I try to help the user out by quickly figuring out the lowest bid amount that they can bid on the auction. I use this amount as the default value for my call to the HTML.textbox helper to generate an HTML text field named amount. After this, I add a validation message for this field with the HTML.validation message helper. Next, on line 42, I generate a hidden field that contains the auction's ID, so the controller action knows which auction the user is bidding on. And finally, I use a standard HTML submit button on line 44 to post the form back to the server. Now, we'll implement the controller action that this form refers to, the bid action on the auctions controller. This new controller action accepts a complex model type, an instance of a bid model, as its parameter. The bid model is a class that we haven't yet defined, so let's go ahead and do that now. To add the bid class, simply right-click on the Models folder and select Add Class, just as we did to create the auction model earlier in the course. Name the new class Bid, and then click OK. Then, populate the bid class with all of the properties that a bid should have. For instance, the ID of the auction that it belongs to, the timestamp when the bid was placed, the username of the user who placed the bid, and the amount of the bid. Notice too that I've added an ID property to give Entity Framework the primary key field it needs, as well as a few data annotations to help ensure that no invalid data gets into the database. With the bid model in place, we can head back to the controller action. The first thing we do in our controller action is to retrieve the auction from the database. Then, validate that our bid is valid, that is, that it refers to a valid auction, and the bid amount is greater than the auction's current price. Once the bid object has passed our custom validation checks, we go ahead and add the bid to the auction's bid collection, set its current price to the bid amount, and then save the updated auction. Before we do all that, however, we set the username property of the bid to the current user on line 48. While it's true that we could have posted this information in the form and let ASP.NET MVC bind the value for us, we don't ever want to accept this kind of information from the outside world. Instead, we'll set it ourselves every time. We're almost ready to save the changes, but there's one problem. We're adding the bid to a bids collection on the auction instance, but that collection doesn't actually exist yet. Luckily, that's easy to rectify by adding a few lines of code to the auction model. Notice that we're making the bids property both virtual and its setter private. We make the property virtual so that Entity Framework can override it when it retrieves this data from the database. And we make the setter private because we don't want anyone other than this class and Entity Framework to set this property. Finally, we initialize the bids collection in the auctions constructor so that we can be sure that it will never be null. While we're at it, let's go ahead and add another property to auction that exposes the number of bids that have been submitted. We'll name this new property bid count, and it will simply return the number of bids that the bids collection contains. Now, let's switch to the auction view and put this property to use by displaying it next to the auction's current price. With all of this in place, we can execute the website, navigate to an auction, and then bid on it. When we bid, we can see the auction's current price and number of bids increase, indicating that our new functionality is working properly. The only problem now, however, is that this involves multiple requests and responses to the server and a full refresh of the page on the client. This is the perfect opportunity to apply a little AJAX functionality. What we need to do to apply AJAX to this scenario is to post the bid form as an AJAX request, as opposed to a full page request. In order to do this, we'll need to change two things: the auction view that posts the bid and the controller action that accepts the AJAX bid. Let's start by editing the auction view. What we need to do here is override the bid button so that when it is clicked, the browser performs an AJAX request instead of performing the full page post. Luckily, jQuery's helper methods make this very easy to accomplish. Simply add the following code to the bottom of the view. This code finds the Post Bid button and overrides its click event. Now, instead of the button's default post behavior, the button will instead execute our custom code, which locates the parent form on line 65, and then sends its values as an AJAX request starting on line 67. When the AJAX request completes, our custom behavior will pop up an alert dialog letting us know whether or not it was successful. Further detail about JavaScript, AJAX, and jQuery is beyond the scope of this course. For more information, check out those topics here in the lynda.com online training library. Next up is the change to the bid controller action. Currently, this action redirects the request to another action after each bid. But since jQuery's AJAX helper sees redirect responses as a successful response, this means that jQuery will think that every request is a successful one. What we want to do instead is have the controller action check to see if the request is an AJAX request or not. If the request isn't AJAX, the controller action is free to return the redirect result as it has been doing. If the request is an AJAX request, the controller action should instead return an HTTP status result that jQuery can analyze to see whether the request was successful or not. Now that all this functionality is in place, we can execute the site and navigate to an auction page. Then we can try to submit a valid bid and see the alert that tells us that it was successful. Likewise, if we try to submit an invalid bid, such as the same bid amount a second time or a lower bid amount, the alert will let us know that the request failed. In this video, I showed you how to add simple and effective AJAX functionality to your page. There is one problem, however. The user experience that we've created with this new AJAX functionality is not very good. For instance, all the feedback we get when we submit a valid bid is that the bid succeeded and nothing more. Meanwhile, our users will probably want to see more than that, such as the current price and the number of bids updating in real time. What we really want to do is update these sections of content with the new values whenever our bids succeed. In the next video, I'll show you how to return small bits of HTML in your AJAX responses so we can do just that.